Most married women are not starving for attention. They're starving to be understood. And there's a vast difference between those two energies. Attention can be loud. It can be surface level. It can come through compliments, texts, checking in gifts, or even a glance across the room. But to truly understand someone, to look into their emotional blueprint and see what they're feeling even when they're not saying a word, that's a completely different vibration. A married woman who feels unseen begins to slowly detach, not because she wants to, but because emotionally she's not being met. See, being watched and being seen are not the same. A woman can be watched all day long by her kids, by her husband, by the world, but still feel invisible. Watch for what she does, how she moves, what she gives. Watch for how well she keeps it all together. But inside, she's asking, does anyone really notice what I'm carrying? That's not a cry for attention. It's a yearning for connection. And here's where most men miss it. They believe presence equals understanding. They think being around her, living in the same space, paying the bills, even talking about today life is enough. But it's not about quantity of time. It's about quality of emotional frequency. If you're physically present, but emotionally unavailable, she feels like she's living with a ghost. You show up in the room, but your spirit didn't arrive with you. You're in the room, but not in her world. And women can feel that disconnect in ways they don't always have the words to express. So what do? Many married women begin to pull back in subtle ways, not out of punishment, but protection. She doesn't raise her voice. She lowers her energy. She doesn't stop loving. You just stop feeling it because she's tired of trying to explain what she needs to someone who she needs with ears, but not with presence. She doesn't need you to solve it. She needs you to see it. And here's the truth. Most don't want to hear women often silence themselves because they've already spoken. Not once, not twice, but many times in the tone of their voice, in the way they sigh at the end of the day, in the way they try to open up and get shut down with logic, not empathy. And after a while, she starts asking herself, what's the point of talking if I'm not being heard on the level that matters? This is where misunderstanding creeps in. A man thinks everything is fine because nothing is being said. But silence doesn't always mean peace. It often means pressure. Pressure building in her heart, in her thoughts, in her identity. The pressure of feeling emotionally disconnected from the one person she thought would get her without needing a breakdown to be understood. Now let's talk about energy. Because everything is energy. A woman will not always tell you directly what's wrong, but she will always radiate the truth of how she feels. She'll radiate frustration when her emotional tank is empty. She'll radiate coldness when she's tired of pretending. She'll radiate distance when she's been present for everyone else, but has no one being present for her. And if you're only paying attention to her words, you're missing 90% of the message. Women speak energy fluently. They live in vibration. So when they stop feeling seen, they start acting in ways that express that unseen pain through mood swings, emotional shutdowns, or a sudden obsession with something outside the marriage. Not because they're selfish, because their soul is searching for resonance. Men are taught to fix things. Women are yearning to feel things. When those two truths don't meet in harmony, chaos begins to grow in the emotional gap between them. A wife is not looking for you to fix her pain. She wants you to witness it, to hold space for it, to let her know, I may not fully get it, but I'm here, and I want to understand you beyond your words. That's when a woman softens again. That's when she starts to feel safe again. Not just physically safe, but emotionally secure. The real reason some married women shift in behavior is not because something external tempted them. It's because the internal environment became emotionally malnourished. You can feed her with stability, money, home, and structure, but if you're not feeding her soul, she begins to seek that nourishment elsewhere. Sometimes in books, sometimes in friendships, sometimes in silence, and yes, sometimes in dangerous places. But it always starts with the same wound. I don't feel seen anymore. She doesn't want the whole world to clap for her. She just wants the one man she chose to see past the surface, to understand the weight behind her smile, to feel the vibration behind her silence, to know the difference between her being okay and her being on autopilot. Because deep down, she doesn't need more attention. She needs more alignment. She needs to remember who she is, not just as a wife or mother, but as a woman with dreams, emotions, and energy flowing through her every second. Most women don't enter marriage confused. They walk in with clarity. They walk in with dreams, with a sense of who they are, with passion, with purpose, with a deep connection to their own essence. But somewhere along the journey, something happens. The roles begin to stack on top of their identity. Wife, mother, caretaker, homemaker, support system. And in the process, their original self-image begins to fade, not because they lost it, because it's been buried under years of self-sacrifice. It's not that they forgot who they are. It's that the world around them stopped reflecting it back. Understand this, the self-image is the thermostat of your life. It regulates everything. How you see yourself, how you allow others to treat you, what you accept, what you believe you deserve. And if a woman had a vibrant, creative, expressive self-image before marriage, but then finds herself constantly giving, constantly adjusting, constantly suppressing just to maintain peace or keep others comfortable, that internal thermostat starts to malfunction. She may be functioning on the outside, but inside she's overheating or freezing, never quite aligned. You got to realize when a woman's self-image begins to erode, it doesn't happen all at once. It happens subtly, quietly. She starts saying what's fine when it's not. She starts dressing for convenience instead of confidence. She stops doing the little things that made her feel alive, not because she doesn't want to, but because the system she's trapped in no longer supports those desires. And over time, her emotional and spiritual reflection in the mirror becomes unfamiliar. She looks at herself and can't remember the last time she felt like herself. And that creates friction, not just in the marriage, but in her spirit. She starts to feel a disconnect between who she once was and who she's become. That's where confusion kicks in. She's not trying to rebuild. She's trying to return. She's not acting distant out of disrespect. She's searching for the parts of herself that got left behind. The parts that lit up the room. The parts that laughed deeply. The parts that wanted more than just routine and responsibility. When a woman operates from a forgotten self-image, her behavior becomes unpredictable. One day she's present. The next day she's cold. One week she's engaged. The next she's numb. She's not unstable. She's unaligned. Her inner world is calling her back to her truth. But her outer world keeps demanding she stay in a version of herself that no longer fits. And that internal tug of war is exhausting. You've got to understand, before she was your wife, before she was your children's mother, before she carried your last name, she was a woman with her own internal vision. She had late night thoughts, big dreams, small fears, wild desires, and creative urges that needed to be expressed. And if marriage became a place where those were shelved rather than supported, then the version of her you're seeing now is a survival version, a functional mask, a conditioned role, not a conscious choice. And that forgotten self-image isn't gone. It's just been waiting for space, waiting for air, waiting for the chance to rise again. It whispers in moments of stillness. It shows up when she's alone in the car. It appears in old songs, in photos from years ago, in sudden bursts of nostalgia. And if she doesn't have the tools or the support to reconnect with that part of herself, she may start seeking external stimulation to fill that internal gap. That's where impulsive decisions, emotional outbursts, or unusual changes in behavior come from. It's not about the surface. It's about the suppressed self screaming to be seen again. Most people try to fix the symptoms. Why is she so moody? Why is she distant? Why doesn't she seem happy anymore? But the deeper question is, has she been given the emotional permission to reconnect with who she was before life started stacking expectations on her shoulders? Or has she been molded into someone who exists for everyone else, but no longer exists for herself? A woman with a strong self-image radiates. She walks with light. She speaks with depth. She nurtures not just others, but herself. But when that image is forgotten, everything dims. Her light becomes conditional. Her love becomes transactional. Her energy becomes guarded. And it's not because she stopped caring. It's because she stopped recognizing the person in the mirror. When she suppresses her self-image long enough, she starts overcompensating in other areas. She throws herself into the needs of others. She works herself into burnout. She becomes hyper-independent or overly passive. None of it is her natural state. It's just the emotional armor she's had to put on to survive a life that no longer reflects her internal vision. And here's the key. You can't restore her self-image for her, but you can create an environment that supports it. You can remind her of who she is through how you speak to her, how you listen, how you value her thoughts, how you encourage her dreams. Because when a woman remembers who she is, everything shifts. Her love expands. Her energy returns. Her presence deepens. But if that self-image remains forgotten, she'll keep walking through life half awake, emotionally disconnected, and spiritually starved. Married women don't always respond to what's being said. They respond to how it makes them feel. They're not reacting to the literal words. They're reacting to the frequency underneath those words. That's what most people miss. You can say all the right things and still be met with silence. You can offer solutions, give advice, even speak calmly, and still feel her drifting further away. Why? Because her emotional radar is more sensitive than logic can comprehend. She doesn't live in bullet points. She lives in vibration. She processes energy, tone, presence, timing, and subtle shifts in your mood more than your explanations. This is where the disconnect often starts. A man tries to solve the situation with facts, but she's reacting to feelings. He says, I didn't say anything wrong, but she's responding to what was felt, not what was spoken. And if the feeling isn't safe, warm, or aligned, it doesn't matter how correct or clever the words are. Her energy reads the situation before her mind processes it. That's why a look, a pause, or a certain energy shift can trigger her more than an entire paragraph of dialogue. And let's go even deeper. This isn't just about mood swings or being too emotional. It's about emotional literacy. A married woman is constantly scanning the emotional climate of her relationship. She feels when tension is building before it erupts. She senses when you're withdrawing even if your actions stay the same. She knows when you're distracted even if your phone's in your pocket. She doesn't need evidence. She reads energy. And if the emotional environment starts to feel cold, dismissive, or unpredictable, her instincts move into self-protection mode. Now when she stops responding, when she starts retreating into silence, when she starts pulling away emotionally, it's not always because of something obvious. Sometimes it's the accumulation of ignored feelings, small things that added up over time, conversations that felt one-sided, moments where she needed presence and got performance instead. And slowly, she starts to believe that expressing her emotions won't lead to understanding. It'll just lead to misunderstanding or dismissal. And that belief changes everything. She doesn't argue as much, not because everything's okay, but because she no longer believes arguing will change anything. She doesn't cry in front of you, not because the pain is gone, but because she doesn't want to feel judged or misunderstood again. She doesn't reach for you, not because the love is gone, because the emotional connection doesn't feel safe. She begins to emotionally disconnect, not as revenge, but as protection. She didn't shut down overnight. It was a slow, quiet, heartbreaking process, not a decision, but a drift. Here's the thing most people don't realize: women are wired to connect emotionally, spiritually, energetically. When that connection is strong, she thrives. But when that connection becomes unpredictable, unstable, or absent, she begins to recalibrate her behavior. She adjusts her expectations. She withdraws her vulnerability. She stops expecting emotional intimacy and starts surviving on routine. And that shift changes everything about how she shows up in the marriage. This isn't about blame. It's about awareness. When a woman reacts irrationally, it's often because her emotional needs have gone unmet for so long that she no longer knows how to communicate them without being labeled as too much. So instead, she starts expressing herself through energy, through absence, through change, through avoidance. And if you're only tuned into what's visible, you'll miss the deeper message being sent. Now understand this: her reaction is always information. When she goes quiet, that's data. When she seems cold, that's communication. When she overreacts to something small, that's often the tip of an emotional iceberg. She's not just reacting to the moment. She's reacting to the emotional pattern that led up to that moment. And if those patterns go unchecked, they begin to build emotional walls that are harder to break through the longer they stand. So what do? You stop reacting to her reactions and start listening to the feeling behind them. You get curious instead of defensive. You ask, what are you feeling that I might be missing? Instead of saying, what did I do now? You learn to be still with her emotion instead of rushing to fix it. You hold the emotional space without rushing to conclusion. You tune into her tone, her silence, her eyes, not just her words. Because when a woman feels like her emotions are honored, not managed, not solved, but honored, her energy softens, her guard lowers, her love flows freely. She doesn't want a perfect partner. She wants a present one. She wants someone who's emotionally available, energetically grounded, and spiritually present, not just physically in the same room. This is the truth. If she's reacting to energy, it's because she's wired to feel beyond what's obvious. She's built to connect on deeper levels. And if that emotional connection is nurtured, she will become a force of love, loyalty, and power that nothing can shake. But if that connection is broken or ignored, her reaction will no longer make sense to you because it's not happening at the level you're used to operating. It's happening at the emotional frequency where she truly lives. From the very beginning, women are taught how to play roles. Before they even become women, as little girls, they're handed invisible scripts. Scripts that say, be polite, don't be too loud, don't want too much, take care of others before yourself. As they grow, those scripts evolve but never disappear. They learn to smile when they're uncomfortable. They learn to nod when they disagree. They learn to shrink when they should be expanding. And by the time a woman gets married, she's already mastered the art of wearing masks, not to deceive, but to survive, to be accepted, to fulfill what's expected of her. She becomes a role, not a person. She's performing, not living. She's been told how to be a good wife, a good daughter, a good mother, a good homemaker. She's been fed narratives from every direction. Family, society, religion, media, that if she just checks all the boxes, love will last, happiness will follow and fulfillment will magically appear. But what happens when she checks all the boxes and still feels empty? What happens when she plays all the roles and still feels unseen? That's when the internal breakdown begins. That's when the disconnect takes root, not from her partner first, but from herself. It's not that she doesn't love. It's not that she's ungrateful. It's that she's exhausted from performing in a life that doesn't reflect her inner truth. She's tired of always being who she's supposed to be and never being who she actually is. And the truth is, many married women don't even know what their truth looks like anymore because they've been so deeply conditioned to play roles that they never had the space to ask themselves, what do I actually want? Who am I without the expectations? The role playing becomes habitual, automatic. Wake up, get the kids ready, clean the house, go to work, smile, cook, serve, support, repeat. But all the while, there's a quiet voice inside whispering, this isn't all I was made for. Not because being a wife or mother isn't sacred, but because only being those things without honoring the rest of who she is feels like a form of spiritual imprisonment. And so she starts to act out, not always with rebellion, but with withdrawal, with silence, with sudden changes, with outbursts that don't match the moment. Because the moment isn't what she's reacting to. She's reacting to the years of emotional neglect toward her own identity. When you suppress your truth long enough, it doesn't die, it transforms. It turns into frustration, resentment, guilt, confusion. And a woman who's trapped in roles she didn't consciously choose starts to feel like a stranger in her own life. She smiles for the family photo, but the light in her eyes is dimmed. She goes through the motions of intimacy, but her spirit is disconnected. She gives and gives until there's nothing left, and then wonders why she feels invisible. This isn't a failure of character. It's a failure of freedom. The freedom to be her full self, to be raw, to be messy, to be honest, to say, oh, I'm tired, I don't want this anymore. I need something more. But she's been trained to feel guilty for those feelings, trained to believe that wanting more is selfish. That expressing dissatisfaction means she's ungrateful. That putting herself first is wrong. So she buries those desires deep and keeps performing the part. But the body remembers, the spirit remembers, the soul remembers. So what does she do? She begins to rebel, not always publicly, but internally. She starts dreaming of other lives. She starts fantasizing about freedom. She starts pulling away emotionally because it feels safer than expressing her truth and being judged for it. She starts investing her energy into other areas, work, hobbies, even distractions, because they offer a glimpse of autonomy, a piece of her identity that isn't tied to who she's supposed to be. And from the outside, it may look like she's changing, becoming distant or cold, but inside she's trying to resurface, trying to reconnect with a version of herself that never got to breathe. And here's what makes it more complicated. Many of these roles come with praise. You're such a great wife. You're the best mom. You're always so strong. But none of those compliments acknowledge the parts of her that feel unseen, unheard, and unfelt. So even the praise feels hollow. Even the applause feels like pressure. Because she's not being recognized for who she is. She's being celebrated for how well she hides her truth and keeps playing the role. Eventually the roles become cages. Not always made of steel, but expectations. And the more she conforms, the less alive she feels. Until one day, she realizes she's surrounded by everything she thought she wanted, but starving for the one thing she truly needs: permission to be herself. Not the version who fits in, not the version who performs perfectly, but the real, raw, authentic self that's been waiting silently behind the mask. Growth is not optional for the soul. It's essential. A married woman doesn't stop evolving just because she said, I do. Her spirit, her mind, her emotions, they are in constant motion. She's expanding, questioning, learning, shifting, even if the world around her wants her to stay the same. Stability might bring her security, but it's growth that brings her aliveness. And when a woman finds herself in a marriage that prioritizes comfort over evolution, where things are predictable but stagnant, her soul starts sending her signals. Restlessness, boredom, a nagging feeling that something is missing, not from her partner, but from within her. You see, stability is often mistaken for fulfillment. Just because things are calm doesn't mean they're meaningful. Just because a life looks good on paper doesn't mean it feels good in her body. A nice house, routine schedules, and shared responsibilities might look like success. But if her mind isn't being stimulated, if her heart isn't being fed, if her soul isn't being stretched, she will begin to shrink inside the very life that's supposed to hold her. And this internal shrinking, this quiet erosion of her identity becomes a slow emotional death. So what does she do? She starts seeking growth wherever she can find it. Maybe it's a new hobby. Maybe she starts reading books that ask deeper questions. Maybe she begins following voices that challenge her to think beyond her role. Maybe she starts reflecting on the woman she used to be and wonders when she stopped chasing wonder. That curiosity isn't dangerous. It's divine. It's a signal that her soul is still alive, still calling her forward. But if that desire for growth is ignored or dismissed, if it's seen as a threat to the relationship rather than a natural part of her becoming, then she begins to feel isolated in her own evolution. A woman wants to grow with a partner, not away from him. But if he's stuck in comfort, if he resists change, if he holds on to outdated dynamics, she will eventually outgrow the version of the marriage that doesn't stretch with her. And when that happens, she'll begin to make quiet exits, not always physical, but emotional. She'll stop sharing her new thoughts. She'll stop inviting him into her inner world. She'll stop expressing what excites her, what challenges her, what's waking her up on the inside, because she doesn't feel met there. She doesn't feel emotionally or intellectually seen. What many men don't realize is that a woman's love deepens with growth when she learns something new, when she expands spiritually or emotionally, when she breaks through limiting beliefs. That growth creates layers of love, new ways of connecting. But if she's not allowed to grow, or if she's shamed for wanting more, her love becomes conditional. It becomes guarded, not out of punishment, but out of protection. Because staying small just to keep the peace is emotional suffocation. Sometimes growth looks like changing careers. Sometimes it looks like exploring spirituality. Sometimes it looks like therapy, coaching, journaling, or surrounding herself with voices that uplift and challenge her. But whatever form it takes, that growth isn't selfish. It's sacred. And if her marriage isn't evolving with her, she will eventually start redefining what love means to her. She will start reimagining what partnership should feel like. And that's when the shift begins, not in her body, but in her spirit. She begins to crave resonance, alignment, depth, not just routine connection, but soul connection. What? That's the part that's hard to explain to someone who doesn't value growth. She's not pulling away because she wants something new. She's pulling away because she wants something true, something that reflects who she's becoming, not just who she was. And if the relationship stays stuck in the past version of her, she will start to feel like a guest in her own life. Like she has to turn herself down just to keep the peace. Like her evolution is an inconvenience, not a blessing. When a woman grows, she doesn't abandon love. She elevates it. She doesn't want to leave the relationship behind. She wants the relationship to rise with her. She wants conversations that challenge her, presence that nourishes her, intimacy that goes beyond the physical and touches the emotional and spiritual. But if she keeps expanding and the relationship stays the same, that gap becomes a weight she can no longer carry quietly. The tragedy is when growth is labeled as selfish, when her desire to become more is seen as a threat instead of an invitation. Because the truth is, her growth benefits everyone. A growing woman is more alive, more loving, more aware, more intentional. But she needs space. She needs encouragement. She needs to be trusted to follow her inner compass without being pulled back into the role she's already outgrown. Because once a woman sees her own potential, once she tastes what it feels like to live from her truth, she cannot go back to pretending that a static life is enough. A married woman is not just a partner, not just a spouse, not just someone who shares responsibilities. She is a mirror. She reflects everything around her, everything within the relationship, everything inside the home. Her energy doesn't exist in isolation. It responds, absorbs, it reflects. And the truth is, how she behaves, how she responds, how she carries herself often says more about the environment she's in than about her own nature. She becomes the echo of the energy that surrounds her. You can't expect her to radiate light in a space that keeps her in the dark. You can't expect her to pour love endlessly if the atmosphere she's in doesn't refill what's being empty. When she seems distant, cold, quiet, unmotivated, look around her before you look at her. What is the emotional climate of her home? Is she being nurtured the way she nurtures? Is she being appreciated or taken for granted? Is the energy in the house peaceful or heavy? Is there open communication or just surface level exchanges? Because whatever's going on around her, it shows up in her. Her behavior is not isolated. It's a response. A mirror reflecting the tone, the rhythm, the vibration of the environment she wakes up in every day. A woman cannot blossom in a space that starves her soul. If there is constant criticism, she becomes self-critical. If there's emotional neglect, she becomes emotionally withdrawn. If there's a lack of curiosity about her inner world, she begins to shrink it until it no longer takes up space. She doesn't become cold overnight. She adapts. She doesn't disconnect because she wants to hurt you. She disconnects because her heart has become tired of being misunderstood or misread. And what you begin to experience is not the real her. It's the reflection of how she's been made to feel. And the mistake that happens too often is trying to fix her instead of fixing the environment. You try to change her mood, her tone, her attitude without realizing that she's a byproduct of the very energy she's been submerged in. You don't water a flower by yelling at its leaves. You fix the soil. You adjust the light. You make sure it's getting what it needs. Then it naturally begins to bloom again. The same applies to a woman. Change the energy around her and you'll see the energy within her return. Now this goes even deeper. A married woman also mirrors your emotional state. If you're anxious, she carries it. If you're emotionally absent, she absorbs the void. If you're closed off, she starts questioning her own worth. She internalizes your energy without always realizing it. And suddenly she starts feeling emotions that don't even belong to her. Emotions she picked up from your silence, your stress, your disconnection. That's why sometimes she reacts to things that seem small because they're not about the moment. They're about the cumulative emotional data she's picked up along the way. A woman reflects not only the energy of her partner, but the balance or imbalance of the relationship itself. If she's always giving and rarely receiving, you'll see it in her fatigue. If she's constantly validating but never being validated, you'll see it in her quiet sadness. If she's expressing but never heard, you'll see it in her eventual silence. She becomes the barometer of the relationship's emotional health. She feels the shifts long before they become visible. She senses what's off even when there are no words for it yet. That's not drama. That's sensitivity. That's her nature. That's the mirror in her doing its job. And yet, too often, her responses are misinterpreted as irrational, emotional, overly sensitive. But if you actually listen with your heart instead of just your ears, you'd realize she's been reflecting what the relationship has been feeding her or failing to feed her. She's not attacking. She's signaling. She's not trying to create distance. She's reacting to it. She's not cold. She's mirroring the emotional temperature you've set without realizing it. This is where self-awareness becomes essential. Because if a woman is your mirror, then what you're seeing in her is also revealing something about you. If she's pulling away, ask yourself where you've withdrawn first. If she's no longer expressing, reflect on how you've been listening. If she's changed, look at what's changed in how she's been treated, heard, or valued. Her behavior is never random. It's responsive. She holds up a mirror to your presence, your absence, your consistency, your growth, or your stagnation. And it's not just about emotional support. It's about energetic responsibility. What are you bringing into the space that she has to hold, carry, or react to? Are you bringing peace or tension, presence or distraction, respect or control, encouragement or pressure? Because she will reflect whatever you bring, amplified by her sensitivity. And if you learn to see her behavior not as a problem, but as a message, you'll stop trying to manage her and start transforming the environment that shapes her. Because that's what she's been responding to all along.